He was born addicted to heroin on the 19th of March, 1971 in the LA County Community Hospital. Conceived in hate, abuse began in the womb. Another unwanted, unwelcome Latin loser born into the life cycle of a living hell. He came out screaming, contorted in pain, twisted faces, grimaced at the sight of another newborn junkie saddled with the sins of his forefathers. His papa left mama before the delivery, hoping to score a quick dime bag in order to celebrate the fact that he wasn't born brain dead or deformed, just a little bit fucked up. Papa never did return after busting up his bike on the way back from East L.A., where the local cholos insisted he join them in a toast to his first and only newly begotten son. Jack and Smack didn't mix too well, and Daddy took a spill which wiped the shit-eating grin clear off his puss. Never did try to see his son again. Mama didn't mind too much, blind to every need except the gnawing in her belly, the bruises between her skinny legs, and the unscratchable bitch of her addiction. She took the next shot on the delivery table 12 minutes after the prodigal son was shat out like a watermelon. His first meal was a weaning of morphine and methadone, a failed attempt to quell the spasms racking through his bloated little belly. He kicked and cried and tried to wish himself dead in the cradle of the nursery, surrounded by all the other undeserving unfortunates. All victims of boozy blood fucks, lust, ritual gangbangs. None, however, less wanted than he was. None more tempered with a vengeance to destroy the lousy fuckers who condemned him to his life sentence under the rule of pain and hate. And never a more hate-filled fucker than what he was destined to become. Oh, beautiful black is the color of my true love's hair. Smooth brown skin. Oh, yeah. I love the son of the devil's advocate. He grew up with a chip on his shoulder, all right. The size of Boulder Dam. At the age of 4, he was beaten into his first coma by Mommy's latest lover. Back in LA County, he remained for 3 weeks while they traced the swelling and clotting, hoping that permanent brain damage wouldn't result from the contusion suffered from the blow from the big black man's left hand. That he lived was a shining testimonial to his predestined mission, a lifelong tribunal littered with the scouring of the self-serving. At 6, he was witness to the degenerate urges of a third-generation coven of practicing devil worshippers. Passed from mouth to cock to crack, his mother initiated him into the Church of Satan, one of the many fuck toys brought into the delirious circle of the chronically demented. He was taught to please others and to enjoy the natural desires he was too young to deny himself of. He quickly became an unquenchable suitor in the pursuits of his own pleasures. Like so many others born into the cleansing circle of fated pain, he learned first how to turn his hatred against himself, and then against everyone else. At the world-weary age of 10, he had already instigated an involvement with the next-door neighbors, a family of 11, who took turns taking out their multiple frustrations on his battered hide. Mother, father, grandmother, daughter, son, suitors from 6 to 60 beat at his bound and gagged body. Calling out the names of saints, of sinners, of each other, they prodded, poked, and pronged themselves into his willing flesh. Like Christians at the altar of worship, they'd whip him into ritual frenzies. Cursing in the name of Satan and salvation, they cleanse themselves of evil influence, using him as a receptacle of their own perverted restitutions. 2 years later, the beating stopped. Although he claimed to never really tire of the abuse, he just needed stronger doses than what the granny's family could any longer deal out. He took his frustrations elsewhere and began his search for a suitable partner. At the age of 12, he moved in with 3 other delinquents, themselves no strangers to cruelty. Living in Hollywood, he began practicing up on his charming ways, fine-honing his skills of verbal manipulations. The only rule in house at 452 Franklin Avenue was that female flesh was to be tasted by all the members of his new family, the whoresome foursome, as they soon became notorious as. In rancid squalor, the petty abuse of these four juvenile tyrants was unparalleled. Filthy Swedish magazines littered the hovel, inspiring them forward on to new horrors. The wrecked room was home to ritual degeneracies dished up to the unending string of teenage girls foolish enough to be coaxed over. Whips, wire, various hardware hung suspended from the ceiling and walls, the only order in an otherwise disheveled bunker. The usual trick was to send out the youngest and the prettiest, usually him, into the evening sunset with one goal in mind: food for thought, fodder for abuse. Once inside, the more often than not intoxicated young bait was blindfolded, beaten, and raped by whoever was present at the time, taking turns on the tender flesh. Cigarettes seared in her thighs, bottles broke on kneecaps, and fingers, fists, and bricks did what they did best: batter, bruise, bleed. Sex came as the final reward. Here the young lords lacerated every opening with a vengeful deliverance. Tortures employed were waylaid on the replicons who stood before them, reminiscent of the mothers they abhorred. They, like their daddies before them, harbored the disease of a sexual affliction harnessed in by the reins of a superior physical dominance. After one particularly gruesome escapade involving the genital scarification of a 15-year-old girl from the valley, the police force were summoned, thus ending their 2-year reign of terror. Since all participants were still underage, no charges could possibly be pressed. So the cops simply destroyed what remained inside of the house, insisting on the immediate evacuation of 452 Franklin Avenue. With no bridges left to burn, at the age of 14, he was forced to return to his mother. Strung out on dope, pills, alcohol, his insidious habits forced him into an even more grisly pattern of deviations. Sporting by now a $125 a day habit, his nocturnal predatorials led him into the alleys and back streets of downtown L.A., where he began to prey upon smacked-out transvestites. Befriending a gaggle of the least homely Mexican and black queens, he began pimping and prostituting right alongside him. Nights would wind down around 6 a.m. with him gathered around the girls, collecting his 30% of the take, demanding a recount of blowjobs, handjobs, fist fucks administered, sympathizing generously with the most busted up of the crew. He'd take that wretch aside, insist upon a tear-soaked butt fuck, and after beating maliciously the whore about the head and neck, would rifle through the pockets and purse, removing all but a $10 bill. With a final kick up the ass, he'd send the queen falling onto his knees on the pavement and smirkily stride off in search of a score. Puking on the first rush of the day, he'd wipe the bile from his pant legs and lips and head back to crash on his mother's couch. In July '85, the walls came crashing in once more, when for the third time that year he had his nose busted with a vacuum cleaner hose by his mother's latest lover, a would-be musician. In the heat of that sweltering midsummer's night, with bandages still intact, he ran into his mother's bedroom and stabbed the bastard smack in the heart with a small stainless steel buck knife, driving the blade deep inside the thick muscle. He cursed at the drunken bastard. "Just get out! Just get the fuck out, man! Just leave me alone! Just leave my mother alone! I'll kill you, I swear to God, I'll fucking kill you!" With fists bathed in blood, he pounded on the swelling gash, attempting to right the wrongs heaped upon the household under the blithering barbarian's rule. Self-defense landed him in juvenile detention until his 16th birthday. Once inside, he learned the joys of self-mutilation, and how by hurting yourself more than anyone else could ever care to want to, he earned the respect of the other inmates. Always the first one to fight, the hammering blows which pounded into him while outnumbered 3-1, he could never match the viciousness of which he would later reap upon himself. Alone in his bunk, the head bashing would begin. Smashing his skull into the damp cement walls was the only way he knew how to make the hurt go away. Replacing an undescribable pain somewhere in the base of his brain with a concentrated, self-inflicted throbbing somehow made the burden of his hatred easier to deal with. It was the same with the broken glass and rusty knife tips. It brought relief, waiting for the scabs and bruises to slowly, gently heal, knowing that they would eventually. Not as much could be said for the psychic or spiritual wounds left over from his life in holy hell. He was released on his 16th birthday after a 2-year incarceration. Custody, of course, was granted to his mother, who by now couldn't stand the sight of him, or the way his presence interfered with her endless stream of fuck-ups. Yeah, she had a thing for alcoholic pill poppers. Cast-offs from Easy Rider, Dirty Harry, Streetcar Named Desire. Men that had done more than their fair share of stretches in Sing Sing, Camarillo, San Quentin, Angola. The kind of cunts who didn't give a fuck how hard their lives were as long as they could make someone else equally as miserable. And that usually meant him. He was out of juvenile only 2 weeks, when Mom's latest addition busted his face against the kitchen sink, breaking out 3 of his top front teeth. Blood splattered all over the white tile linoleum, and he was told to just clean it up. Just pick up your goddamn teeth and take them over to the free clinic in East Hollywood, all right? Laughing hysterically and sobbing between gales, he spits a big wad of blood and phlegm into the left cheek of the Peter Fonda look-alike, who starts punching him repeatedly in the face. But he stood tough, yeah. Tear-stained blood drops running down his chin, laughing. It was only when the fucker reached for the frying pan that he ran through the house swearing, tearing out the front door, slamming it behind him. The cast-iron skillet bolts out after him, crashing mightily into the center of his forehead, screaming at the top of his lungs for the wasted mongrel to come out. Hey, prove what a big man you are. What kind of chicken shit sissy low-life motherfucker fights with a frying pan anyway, huh? Hey, fuck you, man. Fuck you. And just as he's flipping the bastard off, a 67 beat the shit Ford Fairlane comes barreling around the corner, his mom at the wheel, knocking our young hero flat on his busted ass where his head smashes into the fender and a concussion follows. His mother backs the car up after nearly killing him in a jealous stupor of hostility and hate. I mean, after all, Mama had to stand defensively beside her raving madman. I mean, she knew a good thing when she had one. She was hoping all these riled up emotions would soon be employed in another glorious, raging hate fuck. Wasn't that the only reason she had for tolerating these child-hating wife-beaters, huh? The sexual delirium their mania would plunge her into? That free fall? The spiral? He wakes up in L.A. County 2 days later with a note taped to his bedside table. Please don't come home, is all it says. No love, Mom. No love. Nothing. He pulls the tube from his nose, rejects the IV hose from his right arm, and gets dressed. A man with a mission. Dizzy and penniless, he thumbs a ride the 6.5 miles home, stopping first at the Ralph supermarket on La Brea Avenue. Determined not to get caught, he proudly saunters over to the hardware section, shoplifting 3 bottles of lighter fluid, a large box of matches, and a Hershey's chocolate bar. He heads off down Sunset, steely-eyed. Sneaking around to the back of the house, he kicks open the basement window, pummeling the glass with steel boot tips. He finds his mother passed out on the living room couch. How unusual. A dirty black slip hiked to the hips. Popping the safety lock on the first bottle of lighter fluid, he draws a heart around the witch who for the last 16 and a half years has filled him with the hatred of her disease. Kissing her softly on the cheek, he whispers in her ear, "There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home, especially when you don't have a fucking home." He leaves a trail of thick spittle running down her chin. Slapping her once in the face for good luck, she twitches and calls out, "Johnny? Johnny? Is that you?" He lies and coos, "Yeah, it's me. Don't get up. I'm just going down to the liquor store. I'll be right back. She rolls over, a tiny smile crossing her twisted lips. He pulls one of her cigarettes from the full pack beside her and lights up, blowing out the first match. He anoints her with the liquid combustible, baptizing her with the sign of the cross. Chanting in Latin, he begins to pray. Dread Lord of the dark flame, give power. I did not condemn them. They condemned themselves. Informed of their indiscretions, I had no choice. When confronted with the evidence that they had become arrogant in their manner toward the guardians of decency, they conducted strange, dark rites, unholy and terrible, which violated the precincts of the church. So he condemned them to death. So he condemned them to death. So he condemned them to death. It was only right. Dread Lord of the dark flame, give power. Hail, Satan. Kneeling beside her, he sets her thick black hair on fire. The damp couch quickly ignites, the circle of fire engulfing her sleepy body. A ring of fire in the shape of a horseshoe burns brightly, quietly. Backing up out of the heat, he traces her name in butane on the tables and chairs. Rifling through her purse, he stuffs his pockets with dollars and change. Emptying the leftovers of the last 2 canisters, the liquid fluid burns a beautiful, soothing blue. He backs out the front door, savoring the miracle of the flames, unable to pull himself away from such a delicious spectacle. His reverie overpowers. Stuck in place, a massive erection swells from his gut. With half-closed eyes, he begins groping, fondling, pulling on himself. The heat, the smell of burning hair stimulating unknown pleasures. Jacking roughly, ready to spout, he drops to his knees, swearing in Spanish, cursing his mother with satanic litanies recollected from his tortured childhood. What men are they who haunt these fatal glooms, and fill their living mouths with dust of death, and make their habitations in the tombs, and breathe eternal sighs with mortal breath, and pierce life's veil of various error, to reach that void of darkness and old terror. The vilest things must be less vile than thou, from whom it had its being, God and Lord, creator of all woe and sin abhorred. I vow that not for all thy power furled and unfurled, for all the temples to thy glory built, would I assume the ignominious guilt of having made such men in such a world. Making the sign of the cross in a final desecration, he spewed forth a vile, rank, and cantankerous spew, which shot halfway across the room, a small droplet landing on Mommy's lip. Exhausted, nearly delirious, he breaks out in a fit of laughter, rolling around in circles on the floor. The flames lick at a lock of his own hair. Beating himself about the head, he extinguished the small blaze and decided to get the fuck out. Once outside the sweltering inferno, he felt relieved, free of sin, of guilt, free of shame, released, set free. Stopping to count the cash collected from the dying woman's bag, he gathers his breath. It was at this very unfortunate interval that his grandfather, the retired World War II drill sergeant, decides to pull up. Sprinting out of the car, maniacal grin, ear to ear, Grandpa barrels in for a bone-crushing bear hug, lifting him clear off the ground, spinning him around in centrifugal circles. How the hell are you? Hey, long time no see. Yeah, 4 or 5 years, the wise one replies. So you're out, huh? Yeah, I'm out. Well, let's go inside. Now, my mother's sleeping. And with no choice left, he's dragged to the front door, locked in a sturdy embrace. As the old man goes to open the door, his fingers singe on the heat of the metal knob. Terrified recognition crosses the old man's war-torn face. Turning to face each other, he begins pounding, fists, feet against the young pyro's pliant body. Defenseless against the blows, he accepts them with resignation. This wasn't his first adventure in punishment rendered for crimes committed. Dragging him across the lawn to the nearest neighbors, held in a vice-like headlock, there was no chance for escape. He didn't even fucking try. The ambulance was the first to arrive, followed quickly by the police and the fire department. He was roughly handcuffed, shoved in the back of the police van, and returned once more to juvie, where he was to spend 6 more miserable months until finally, on his 18th birthday, he was released on good behavior. He got out and got strung out again. The pressure and the loneliness, too much. Nowhere to go, no one to talk to, no money, no drugs, no nothing. He started hanging out at the sleazy bars on Hollywood and Vine, picking up on the aging go-go girls, ex-strippers and prostitutes, women used to his kind of abuse, who through some kind of defense mechanism mistook this type of attention as affection. All victims themselves of lonely lives lost to the thieving streets. He'd hook 'em, oh yeah, on his own addiction to bone-crushing power fucks, twisting them up inside until they'd love him just enough to support his various bad habits. Dust, speed, coke, dope, cocktails. They only spurred on his need for retribution. Using any available icon, he punished ferociously the sins of his mother, banging his full body weight into the willing receptors. Every sexual escapade became an act of unmitigated violence. As blood raced from brain cells, fist became engorged, outraged, pounding inside them. Punching would follow. Black eyes, bruised lips, blood clots, teardrops. He took out on them what the rest of the world took out on him. 18 years of hardship, mishap, and hellfire would boil over, bursting forth in unstoppable fits, spasms. His only satisfaction came through another's annihilation. To make them hurt as much as he did was the only way to relieve the pain he could no longer bear reliving. It was a late autumn night after a serious session of titty torture and humiliation involving Patty, a burnt-out 33-year-old ex-Vegas showgirl fallen on hard times and bad luck, that he stumbled upon his near-mirror reflection. A beautiful young Latino girl sprawled out in the alley, in back of the showgirl's crash pad. Thinking her just drunk and fucked up, he stumbled over, kicking the teenager in the ribs. Hard. No reply. Kicked her twice in the ass. Nothing. Cracked her head against the dumpster. No response. Slapped her soft, velvety face. Again. Dead. OD'd. Crumpled into a small, wet, raggedy heap littered before him. He bent down, stuck his hands in her pockets. $30 in that out-of-town ID stating she was 15. He took the needle from her inner elbow, tasting the blood-crusted junk. Not bad, he mumbled, lifting the tiny girl up over his shoulder, slipping her quietly into the trash receptacle, looking back to make sure no one had seen. He traveled east, hoping to score a quick dime. Within minutes, he was fixing 2 alleyways away, using the very same needle recovered from the human wreckage left rotting in the garbage can. No sooner had the shit started rocketing into his bloodstream than the bile pushed forward, pulsing into his throat, out his mouth. Not bad, he grumbled, stoned, but still bitter. He sunk to his knees, tumbling forward, the weight of his heartless disconcern crashing into him. The realization that he had finally become everything he had hated and everybody else was a burden he was not prepared to face. He picked up the dejected works, plunging the spike over and over again into his arms, his wrist, his hands, his neck, stabbing wildly. He was searching frantically for a valve that would unhinge, that would release, that would set free. He was trying to find a black hole somewhere deep inside, that once plundered, it would concentrate all the pain and horror and heartache into a solid-bodied center, looking for a way in to the void. Yeah, that would lovingly engulf, lovingly embrace, lovingly surround, lovingly erase. Looking for somewhere, somehow, someone who could help him to house the unending cycle of pain and hate. Yeah, looking for someone like me.